Hey, it's Francis Lamb, host of The Splendid Table. Every week on our show, we talk about food and cooking and the meanings of food and cooking. We talk with the most interesting people in food about their techniques, their culture, and everything in between. Whether it's about how fried chicken took over the world or how Instagram changes the way people are actually eating. It's a food show where everyone is welcome. Come join us. You can listen to The Splendid Table wherever you get your podcasts.
You're listening to Heritage Radio Network.
Hey, welcome to Beer Sessions Radio on Heritage Radio Network. I'm Jimmy Carbone, I'm the host, and it's our 15th year of Heritage Radio Network. Check us out at heritageradionetwork.org. Support us, become a member. So last year in Novare Res at the Craft Malt Conference in Portland, Maine, our friends from Blue Ox Malt helped put together an amazing list of regional craft malt beers, and it was one of the finest tap nights I've ever had at a beer bar. And they had everything from specialty malts and traditional beer styles from breweries I'd never heard of, like Norway, Lamplighter, Fogtown, Foulmouth, Tributary, Bellflower, and others. And the one that really hooked for me and where we are today is Northwoods. Northwoods is way up in New Hampshire, and it's just the address is First New Hampshire Turnpike, Northwood, New Hampshire. It tells you something about New England. So I'm really thrilled to be here. And we're going to talk more about craft malt and beer styles and why we like drinking good beer. So we'll go around the room. So I'm Jimmy Carbone. I'm the host.
Jeff Giles, head brewer at Northwood's Brewing Company.
Ian Goering with Blue Ox Malthouse.
Joe Ronaldo with Blue Ox Malthouse.
Steve Schmidt from Northwood Brewing Company.
It's a nice place here. Jeff invited me up a while back. We had done a recap in the winter talking about last year's Craft Malt Conference. And we said we should get together with Ian from Blue Ox Malt and brewers and talk about some of the beers that they're making and the role that the craft maltster plays in these beers. So, Jeff, just a little background on you and about the beers that we're going to be tasting today.
Sure. So I've been brewing for, about 9 years now. I got my start at Red Hook Brewing Company. Now, a lot of people know it as Cisco now over in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. And I was there for about 5 years. That's definitely where I sort of cut my teeth in the brewing industry. Obviously pretty large scale. So eventually I kind of got tired of that sort of production madness and came over here to Northwood's Brewing Company, and it was definitely a positive lifestyle change. And after a couple of years, I became the head brewer here, and it's been a great experience. I've learned a lot, and it's nice to be able to, sort of brew the classic styles that you want to brew and use the ingredients that you want to use and that other people want to use. And I think that craft malt has been on the up and up for a while now, and Northwoods Brewing is happy to take part in that. So,
there's one thing now that I feel like the craft malt industry has really come a long way in the last 10 years, and I feel like the beers, going back to the Craft Malt Conference last year, the beers that I'm drinking with good craft malt, for me, are better. They're better than other beers. How do you describe that? Like, for me, as I'm a drinker, I'm not a scientist. So how can you tell me that these beers taste better to me than other beers I have?
So I think whether you're talking to brewers or chefs or anybody that's working in the food space, no matter what their personal philosophy or background or training is, it all kind of comes back down to quality ingredients and fresh, local quality ingredients. And that's what craft malt is really able to provide. We're not kicking malt out to the rest of the world. We're not bringing grain in from all over the place. We're keeping it the local grain for the local breweries, and it's fresh and it's got unique flavors, and it just helps everybody stand out in a really crowded brewing industry to use those fresh quality local ingredients.
Great. And Ian, you were on with me in the winter. We talked about this, but let's refresh everybody. Tell us about you. I mean, you have a unique role. You're not just in sales.
So I've been brewing in Maine and New Hampshire for a little over a dozen years now, and I came on to join the Malt House this summer as a account manager, doing both sales but also customer support and customer service, which I really enjoy. I like the problem solving side of the beer industry and working with our customers on the projects that they want to work on to use local ingredients, do interesting projects is just a ton of fun. I get to go around and hang out with brewers all day, which is awesome.
Yeah, that was kind of the hook for the show that Jeff, we had to record when you were here. A couple of times we were going to be here on a brew day. I think at first you invited me for the Munich Dunkel Day. And then why would he be here? What role does the maltster play in that beer, for example, the Munich? We can taste that afterwards too.
Yeah, we'll definitely taste it. It's one of the main reasons why we like to use Blue Ox or Maine Malthouse, for instance, is because we have these personal relationships with say Ian, for instance, and we can have a discussion about which malts they offer and what beers they suggest we use them in. I didn't personally write the recipe for the Dunkel. That would be Steve. So I'll let him talk about that. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Munich Dunkel.
yeah. So the Munich Dunkel for me, I was fortunate enough to live and brew in England for a while, and that really kind of made me appreciate being involved from the farmer all the way out to through the malting process, all the way to the brew house. And the way having that opportunity here in New England was just great. And also knowing Ian was wonderful because I know Ian's a good brewer on top of all that and appreciates that type of style of beer. So when Ian, said, hey, we have this a couple different Munich type malts available, I was like, hey, I want to use these. And we did. And it was a combination of actually Pilsner, light Munich and dark Munich, and just a touch of one of their crystals. And I'll be honest with you, it came out way better than I expected. Like, it hit above the bar that I ever really, quite honestly, thought it was going to do. All the malt flavors came through perfectly. And in a beer like that, it showcases the malt. It's not about the hops. And that worked out great. So for me, supporting locally grown and raised barley and then locally malted through people who have an appreciation for that I can't think of a better relationship.
Yeah, I really like the German styles. It's what I lean in towards. And one of the things that I really enjoy about the German styles is that they so often focus on the malt. And these styles have deep histories and traditions that they're coming out of. I think last time we had talked about how local ingredients is how culture is made. You're dealing with what you've got, and what you can make with what you've got eventually becomes culture. And the Munich style lagers are a great example of that. All the malts at that point in time would have had some dark color to them. They're experimenting with cold aging, and it was kind of the natural evolution of what Munich and Southern Bavaria were going to have for beer styles for centuries. And so it's nice that they can keep these beers traditional the way that they brew them here, but still use the local ingredients. And one of the nice things about our malt is that it's on the spec sheet, we kind of sit nicely between European malts and American malts, kind of have the best of both worlds with our malt, so that breweries can do these classic styles and keep them very true to style, but still bringing some of the unique flavors and techniques that American brewers are playing with these days.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the neat things too that you run into when you use different malts throughout the world, but especially locally, is there's a unique flavor to that local malt, from the barley all the way through the brew house. And it's always hard to get some of those traditional flavors when you don't have the same conditions. You don't have the same brewing type equipment, and or barley's different, the base barley for making that malt. All of that's different. And that's why, you getting a local flavor is unique. And that character, I think, should symbolize what makes a product special. And the Blue Ox malt with us worked out perfectly, because we can't reproduce this. It's a unique thing that we can do here. And I loved how it came out, because it does show homage to the traditional Bavarian beers, which I'm extremely fond of. And I felt it would, any German, Bavarian, I have many friends in Bavaria, and I would tell you they would all have drank it and probably said, "It's okay, Steve."
Yeah.
Well, maybe it's almost good enough, but that for a German, that would be probably the best compliment we could have ever gotten. And I attribute 99% of that to the malt. I mean, all I did was use what they had and tried to do my job as a brewer the best I could. So without good malt, I couldn't have done it. So.
And Joe, why don't you join in? You're new to this group.
Yeah, so I couldn't help, while listening to all of this, I couldn't help but oogle the glass that you're drinking from that says, beer should take you somewhere. And I think, speaking to what Ian has said and what Steve has said and what Jeff has said, it's all part of the same story, which is, communicating this wonderful agrarian community out into the world, out to a customer. How do you make a story? How do you write a story that people and a customer want to live in? Local malt is a huge part of that. And local beer is a huge part of that. You create a message and a story that people, again, they want to write their own passage of. And local malt and local beer have a huge part of that. So again, I'm stealing a little bit from the Northwood's marketing, but it resonated perfectly with what everybody was saying.
I'll tell you, just in my little time in this business in 2014, I remember we did one of the first craft malt beer events in New York, and literally there was Valley Malt in Massachusetts, the only maltster in the Northeast, and we basically had to twist the arm of 20 brewers in the New York area to make one batch of beer. And that was slightly controversial. Some of them didn't know how to deal with the different specs and everything. And then in 2019, we did another version of that event, and we literally had in 5 years we had breweries from Maine to North Carolina, from Burial, Allagash, and everything in between, who were just dying to come in with a sixtel of beer that was made from malt facilities near to them, never mind from Massachusetts. So, I mean, for me, the story is amazing, and I like that you guys have really run with this. At Novare Res last year, again, I'm gonna read off some of these breweries, because all these breweries stepped up, and it wasn't like they just made one batch. I mean, these breweries are making regular batches of beer with some craft malt. It was Norway in Northwoods, Norway in Maine, Northwoods in New Hampshire, Lamplighter, Massachusetts, Allagash in Maine, Fogtown, where I don't know. Ox, you guys know, where's Fogtown?
Fogtown is all the way up near Bar Harbor in Ellsworth, Maine. I just brewed an oyster beer with those guys last week.
And then Oxbow.
Also in Maine. They're got locations in Portland that people can go to, but they've got a couple of locations all over the state.
And Foulmouth?
Foulmouth actually closed their doors last week.
Or Tributary, we know Kittery, Maine Beer Co.
That's in Freeport, Maine.
And then Bellflower.
Portland, Maine.
Rising Tide.
Also Portland, Maine.
And Bissell Brothers.
Little town no one's heard of called Portland, Maine.
But that's just a little snapshot of it. I can't always communicate my enthusiasm. I think if you were sitting there in that bar with this list and all the beers in front of you, and it wasn't just the beers themselves, the styles. The styles I want to talk about at some point in the show, but it's also the colors. The diversity of beer. It's fascinating when you've got the right glassware, and I feel like that beer still has a long way to go in this country, and that for me that was a great example. The certain glasswares, colors of beer, certain beer styles, craft malt. I feel like we're all on top of it. So that's my little intro. We're just going to kind of get crazy here. But Jeff, with you, going back to this beer that we're pouring, it's a fun process when we book some of these shows, because I came up to Northwood's Brewing Company. It's the first New Hampshire Turnpike and I had no idea where it was, but it's really not that hard to get to from rest of New England. And we had a couple of emails back and forth. You were saying things like, the brew went well, Ian wasn't able to make it on brew day as well, so it was pretty standard. And I think we rescheduled like 3 or 4 times just to get this crew together. And now this one, the Kolsch, the brew has been evolving well and is currently lagering. I'll do some planning tomorrow and get you a solid day for release. So the beer is in front of us now, this Kolsch. Let's talk about that. I think we've got an intro with everybody. We can drink it and taste it. But you tell me more, Jeff. I mean, it's kind of neat. Your role, are you coordinating what? Like your particular role in this brewery? It's quite a nice place.
Yeah. It's definitely my home away from home, and I think it is for most of the other guys that work down there too. And we all get to, as we can, we get to brew some of the styles that we want to brew. And we've actually been making this Kolsch style ale for, I think, 4 years now. And it's, been progressively evolving over the course of that time. This batch that we just made is the first time that we've scaled it up to a production batch that we've been able to package. And with that, I decided that, with our relationship with Blue Ox Malting, that why not showcase some of their malts in this beer. So we used their Yankee Pilsner, a little bit of their Light Munich, and some of their Triticale, which is a really lovely malt that just kind of adds like a nice cereal, sort of floral cereal essence to it.
Out of the bag. I love eating that malt out of the bag. It smells and tastes amazing.
Yeah, I didn't think we were going to sell any because I couldn't walk when it came off the kiln. I couldn't walk by a bag without taking a handful and just eating it. It is truly a delicious grain.
Yeah, it really is just fantastic. So didn't take much for me to just be like, yeah, we're going to throw 50 pounds in there and, kind of add to the head retention and that sort of thing, and the complexity of it. And the hopping schedule's pretty normal for a Kolsch, I would say. We kind of showcased noble hops just to kind of balance out those malt flavors. But it is, once again, it's mostly about the malt. It's got a nice bready, crackery malt profile and high carbonation level. It's been lagered for right around 3 weeks, so it's quite bright at this point. And yeah, I mean, I think it's better than any batch we've ever made of it, and I'm proud to say that maybe a German might like to drink it. I don't know. But
for you guys, talk about the arc of learning to work with specialty malts and craft malts, and it's like a musician. You're learning how to play an instrument or something.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that's actually a good analogy. We're very fortunate. We have a 3-barrel pilot system that lets us kind of play before we go to the production size. And it's been really beneficial because a lot of times we want to make a recipe that focuses mostly on one particular malt so that you can really get to know what it brings to the table. And, I think that's given us a little bit of an advantage to be able to kind of tune in exactly the ratios and stuff. So that's been really helpful. Yeah, I mean, you kind of have to brew with them. You can taste them all you want. It's helpful, but until you actually make beer with it, and how does it interact with everything else? I think you kind of have to finish the job.
I would say that local ingredients are what first got me interested in traditional brewing techniques. When I first started brewing, where we were getting new local hops and local malt houses, depending on what you were getting early on, might not be at the same levels that some of the big malt houses that we were importing from Europe were at. So really kind of dove deep into, well, how did, people 500 years ago deal with variances in crops and things like that? And really kind of set me on this path, particularly down like German brewing and historical German brewing techniques and how to deal with these local ingredients. Fast forward to today, and basically all of the local suppliers have really worked out all of the kinks, and everybody is really putting out high quality, well-modified, interesting products that are very consistent. And the industry has really, really grown up. But that's kind of been my history with using local ingredients and learning to work with them. And moving forward with that.
So, and for the long time, it was brewers were asking, well, I don't care about the craft malt. I want base malt. I need just good base malt. But you guys have gone beyond that. So I want to hear more about this, the mix and match, base malt, specialty malts. It really gets complicated.
It certainly can. I mean, some of it's just brewer's choice. You have to be able to use what's in your toolkit, but a lot of it's, fairly interchangeable. A lot of these maltsters are making high quality products that are comparable to, something that maybe Vireman might make or Crisp or something. So it's not really that hard of a decision to switch those out for something that's local that, can support, the local industry. And you have to pay attention to the specs of those, some of those maltsters. There's a little bit more variability there maybe. But it's not something you can't work around usually. And again, having that communication with the maltster themselves on what batch is looking like what, you can use what's in your toolkit to make that malt work for you and the recipe that you're trying to build.
So for this beer, the eight penny Kolsch, I mean, what kind of conversations did you have as the malt sales rep?
Oh, well, with Kolsch, we started probably back in the 13th century. And
Keep going, bro. Come on.
So, yeah, Kolsch is a beer that's really special and important to me personally. I absolutely love this style. It's my favorite style of beer. When I first started brewing with Northwoods is about the time they started making this beer. So I kind of got to see this from the first stages up until where it's come today. And with Kolsch and really all beers, but particularly with the beer like Kolsch, it's all about balanced and nuance. So it's how do we make this interesting, but just, infinitely drinkable and approachable and just well balanced. And the whole conversation is focused around that.
And what about the 13th century? You brought it up. I know you're supposed to go deep with me. That's why you're here, Ian. We coordinated for like 3 months just to get you in the same room as me.
Yeah, so Kolsch has a long history. When I talk about the German beer world, it's kind of been a three-way fight between the church, the royal families, and the business class. And depending on where you were at what point in time, particularly the church or the nobility could run monopolies in their favor. The business class kind of never had the privilege of running monopolies in that kind of a way. So Cologne, Germany, where Kolsch is from, was needing to just kind of compete in the full-on capitalist kind of a way where they just needed to make a better product because they didn't have the advantage of having monopolies like the church or the nobility class could have. So when Southern Germany started making lagers and taking over the world and taking everybody's business, they really needed to kind of answer this lager craze, and Kolsch is what came out of that. What's really interesting about Kolsch is that you can brew it as an ale, you can brew it as a lager. It kind of sits in between, and it comes up to the individual brewer and brewery to decide how they want to approach that beer. But at the end of the day, it needs to be balanced, drinkable, approachable beer. Kolsch is supposed to be a beer that you can drink all day long. I always recommend it for weddings. Everybody that enjoys beer is going to enjoy a Kolsch. And they're not high ABV, so your weird uncle isn't going to get too drunk. And they're just great summery beers.
The name Kolsch, does it sell? I remember, I can bring this up now. Years ago, Carton Brewing on New Jersey, he had a beer called Boat Beer. And I said, Augie, you should just call it Hoppy Kolsch. He says, no, we can't because it's not true to style. And but he sold a lot of boat beer. And I saw some Kolsch on recently in New York at Spite and Dival. And some of the new younger guys didn't know what a Kolsch was.
So, yeah, calling something a Kolsch is kind of a bold move. I'm going to butcher the French here, but Cologne does have an appellation de contrôle. Basically, the thing that says you can't call it champagne if you don't make it in Champagne. Kolsch has the same thing going for it, legally speaking. So you'll see a lot of people pay respect to that and call it a Kolsch style. Before Kolsch became more of a household name in this country, a lot of people would make their Kolsches and call them summer ales because that was a less scary German word for a lot of English-speaking Americans. But since the entire American beer market has become a lot more educated in the past decade, we can call these beers Kolsch now, and I don't really see it affecting sales one way or the other if you call it a Kolsch style, or what are we calling this one? 8 penny.
Yeah, so going back to my beginning of my professional brewing history, time, we were making a Kolsch back in the mid 90s. Yes, I've been doing this that long. And I made
Steve, where was that?
It was at Empire Brewing Company in New York, upstate New York, Syracuse, actually. And we did not call it Kolsch because it was one of my favorite styles of beer also, because I had an opportunity to go over to Cologne and visit many of the breweries. And I will tell you, there's variations in Kolsch. So there is no hard and fast rule, no matter what the style guidelines tell you. They all have to fit within some parameters, I would say. But other than that, there can be malty, they can be hoppy, they can be a little crackery, they can be sweet. There's definitely variation to them. However, they do need to have some things to them. But we made a beer, and that's early in the craft beer days, as you can imagine. So the last thing I wanted to do is call a beer that nobody knew what the heck a Kolsch was. So we called it Skinny Atlas Light because Skinny Atlas Lake was the water supply for all of our water at the brewery, which happens to be amazing water for brewing. I'll just say that. And it was a Kolsch beer, but I called it Skinny Atlas Light because the color and the flavor profile fit close enough to what the Budweiser drinkers of the world back then had in their mind, and they took a chance on it. And I think if we call it Kolsch, they would have skipped right over it.
The first Kolsch I made commercially at a brewery, it annoyed the heck out of me because everybody came in ordering a Grolsch, which I then had to explain was another brewery, and this was a completely different style, and a K is not a G, and moving forward. So it's nice that the culture has really become educated to the level now that that's almost a household word in this country as well.
Yeah, and this beer that we made, 8 penny Kolsch style ale, is happens to be, when it's on tap, it's one of our best selling beers. So it's a testament to the fact that people in the craft beer scene these days are gravitating towards more classic styles, and things that aren't, in your face, fruity or hoppy are appealing to people. And I think you'll see more and more of a comeback as time goes on.
And then back to the making of the beer. So Steve, I know your hands in everything here. Let's talk about the malt selection process. Only because I'm scared. It's a challenging subject
in general, or
for this beer in particular, or other beers as well.
I'll be completely honest. I kind of kept hands off of this beer, and Jeff had been developing this recipe for a long time. And Jeff, kind of threw it at me to make sure, is there anything I should be alarmed at here? And I said, no, this looks great. And then brewed it, and quite honestly, it came out really good. It's different than how I traditionally make my Kolsches, but I really enjoy that difference. And like I mentioned before, I think it fits well within what I would consider a true Kolsch. And this one has a little bit more of what I like to term like a crackery flavor to it, which is completely acceptable. And I like what it brings to the Kolsch flavor. I think it works well in this beer. My Kolsch beers were a little different than this, but I would say that it's well within what you can find in Cologne if you go walk around in the breweries in Cologne, because you can see this much variation there too.
Yeah, as far as the malt profile and selecting the malts, again, it wasn't really that hard of a choice for me just to go with Blue Ox's Yankee Pilsner. It's at this point it's won a medal. Did it just recently win a medal for
Silver medal
for a Pilsner in the Craft Malt Conference? So that was what we went with for the base malt. We used a little bit of their Light Munich, another award-winning Blue Ox malt, for just some color and a little added complexity. And then that, like I said, that triticale that we used just for more malt complexity and a little bit of head retention, a little extra protein there. And I think they all came together to just make a wonderful product.
Well, let's talk about the malt.
Yeah, so I think the triticale is the real interesting thing that went in there, and I love that they used that. There is, I will speak for all of Germany, which I'm not qualified to do, but they will say that is what makes it not a Kolsch.
But 13th century Germany, you know about.
Oh, yeah, they would be okay with the triticale, but modern Germans would not be okay with it. But yeah, so that's kind of the oddball ingredient that as American brewers, we have the freedom to play around with things like that and kind of break those traditions. But I really like it when an American brewer can play with the tradition and not absolutely stomp all over it and ignore it. So taking a beer like a Kolsch and adding a non-traditional grain like triticale to it, I think is very intelligent, makes great beer. It still pays respect to what the beer is supposed to be, where it comes from, but adds Northwood's independent flavor and thumbprint to that beer. Which is why you would want to drink this beer from these guys. It's going to be different from other Kolsches you've had while still being a Kolsch.
And then the farms. What's little backstory on? You can pick one of the malts or all of them.
For the farms, yeah. So what's really fun and I guess different in the grain world for Maine barley is that all of our farmers are predominantly potato farmers. It's the number one crop in Maine, and cereal grains are grown in rotation with the potatoes. So all of our farmers know potatoes is the big cash crop, and then we come in for the rotation years crops and really work with them to say, hey, if you can meet these standards with your rotation crop, then you can take advantage of this huge beer and distillery culture that we've got growing in New England right now. So all of our farms are up in Aroostook County, which is called the county in Maine because it's like half the state. And potatoes king up there with now barley and rye and wheat and oats kind of getting mixed in as a now much more profitable crop for those guys.
Wow, that's pretty great. And Joe, you're new to the team. How do you talk about the county?
I mean, it's the main supplier of our most local grains. You know, we whenever possible, basically malt grain that's grown from up in the county. And again, my exposure came when I started working at Allagash Brewing Company. They have a really intimate relationship with Maine farms and that are rotating barley with potatoes. It's I think it's a really awesome industry that exists. And again, like I said before, it's an awesome story that doesn't always get to be told, and now we get to tell it.
Yeah, drink from the glass. I mean, does that conversation come up with your customers, Jeff?
As far as
The local malt, the farm connection, do people think about that? Do they taste it?
Yeah, I don't know that they're necessarily searching it out. Some people may be, but I think that, as time moves forward, more and more people are trying to source local, whether it be their food, their vegetables, their fruits, whatever. And beer is a food product. So when people see that the ingredients that you used are from Maine or from Vermont or from Massachusetts or something like that, and it supported that local economy, people care about that. And I think that, they may be willing to pay a slightly higher price point, or they may be more interested in trying it if they know that it was a local thing rather than, from somewhere on the other side of the country or the other side of the world.
And how much other information do you give to your customers? Like this beer, the Kolsch, do you talk about how long it sat in tanks? You talk about your process at all?
Yeah, I mean, we disclose most of that on our menu items. Obviously, there's only so much space, but we're pretty open about all that, and would definitely advertise heavily that we used local malt or local hops in beers that we do. And if there's more tank residency time, then we advertise that, because people who are into drinking crisp lagers and things that benefit from more conditioning time, they care about that and they see that. So, yeah.
What are some of the other beers that you're brewing that use Blue Ox malt beer malts?
Honestly, we've been starting to use more and more of it, and that's just kind of a direction that me and the owner Jeff are trying to push the company. And a financially responsible way. We can't just, go 0 to 60 on it just yet, but as time goes on, we're going to use more and more. And Steve's production batch of that Dunkel was sort of our first foot in the door with using Blue Ox's ingredients. But since then, we've brewed 2 production-sized batches of our Tomave Pivo Czech Dark Lager. Both came out phenomenally. We used almost exclusively their malt, I think, except for maybe the roasted malt, because you guys hadn't started roasting at that time.
Not yet.
Oh, not yet.
Give us a couple months. Give us a couple months.
On its way.
Yeah. So when that time comes, we will certainly be looking at them for the color on that beer. And then more recently, obviously, we brewed the Kolsch. And we have a 15-barrel Italian Pilsner in the tank now that uses almost exclusively Blue Ox malt. And recently we designed an even larger scale batch of a sort of a light ale that uses all their pale malt, light Munich, actually I think it was dark Munich, and even more triticale. And that beer is just hitting the markets now. It's called Northwood's Life. And it also uses some local hops from Champlain Valley up in Vermont. So I think with designing that recipe, I had in mind that locally sourced and grown ingredients are going to become more and more paramount in people's minds. People are looking a little bit more locally rather than globally.
Well, this has been a great introduction. We're going to take a short break. We'll be back in a few minutes on Beer Sessions Radio. So, hey, welcome back to Beer Sessions Radio on Heritage Radio Network. I'm Jimmy Carboni. Thank you so much for 15 years of Heritage Radio Network. Support us, become a member at heritageradionetwork.org. So, follow up to Craft Malt Conference. We're here at Northwood's Brewing up there at New Hampshire Turnpike, Northwood, New Hampshire. You will find it because this is paradise up here, a beautiful place. Tell me about this place. There's a restaurant, there's a brewery. It's like the most pleasant brewery I've been into in a long time.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly, it has a view for sure. We're, smack dab in the middle of sort of central New Hampshire lakes region, or at least the southern end of it. So there's a lot of lake life activity that goes on around here, and that makes our brewery a little bit more seasonal. So things are getting ready to ramp up here. We're getting ready for our busy season, and the tap room is bracing itself for that. So a little history about the brewery, the owner, Jeff Fennerty and the Fennerty family, they owned the steak and seafood and ice cream place next door for, I don't know, well over a decade. And he owned a couple of other restaurants as well. And he sold his stake in those restaurants to come up with the capital to start this brewery, with the idea of starting a small scale production brewery that, I don't think he was trying to break the world in any way, and we probably never will, but, I think we're making a high quality product that eventually, I think people are going to stop in for on a regular basis, if they don't already. And we're sort of smack dab in between Portsmouth, New Hampshire and Concord, New Hampshire on Route 4, which is also known as Antiques Alley. So there's a lot of antiquers that come through, and they tend to be of the older generation that may be especially interested in classic styles. So we have that crowd that comes to us as well, in addition to the lake life crowd. But yeah, I mean, the view is fantastic, so it doesn't really get old.
And then just through the Craft Malt Conference last year in Blue Ox Malt, we found a gem, a place that's using more and more local malt in their beers. Ian, selling craft malt. How do you sell it? What's your approach? I know you started as a brewer, and how important are the styles when you're matching malts? Let's talk us through, and Joe too. Selling craft malt, and there's definitely a finesse.
Yeah. So I think that it's really apt that we're here at Northwoods for this particular question. And this is a partnership that just really made sense for us. Northwoods really wants to share particularly the sporting traditions of Northern New England, the rural agricultural cultures of New England. And it's very much the story that Blue Ox is telling as well. We work with family farms, we're local, everybody is very culture and community focused. We recently did the math out and realized that 85 cents of every dollar spent with Blue Ox stays in the state of Maine, which feels great. When we're growing the grains in New England, we're malting it in New England, brewing it in New England, drinking it in New England, New Englanders win. So it partnerships with breweries like Northwoods just builds authenticity to both of our brands. And whether the end consumer realizes it or not, it does build to that authentic feeling that they do realize, whether if they can put their finger on that or not. So when I'm selling malt, I like to talk about that. How can we partner up and tell each other's stories? We know the flavor's there. We know the quality is there. We know the story is there. The customer service is there. So it's how can we help each other out to tell each other's stories, build authenticity, and move the ball forward. At the end of the day, we all just want to make this beer community better.
So how did you get triticale? What is triticale? I had friends in the grains movement, they talked about 15 years ago, dying to get people to use triticale. I still don't know what it is.
Yeah, so it's a cross between rye and wheat. It's interesting because you don't get a lot of the citrusy flavors of wheat or a lot of kind of the apple fruity flavors of rye. I get a lot of sugar cookie graham cracker off of it. It's rare to find triticale in the malting world. It's predominantly grown as a feed grain, but there are a couple of farms that are growing high quality malting standard triticale, and we couldn't be more excited about it. It's certified organic product, so our organic customers are allowed to play with that as well. And it's just very interesting. It's a huskless grain, so you kind of got to brew with it in the same way that you would brew with wheat or rye. But it just has a real unique flavor profile that not really any other grains kind of tread into.
So what do you mean you have to brew with it the way you do with wheat or rye?
So wheat and rye are notoriously sticky grains, which can cause for long, difficult brew days that put everybody into overtime and low on patience by the end of them. So there are particular brewing styles that you would need to, and philosophies you'd need to employ to basically deal with these stickier grains to still have an efficient brew day.
Yeah, and to build on that, I mean, the amount of triticale that we're using in these beers is, we're talking 10% max. So it's really, it's not at the point where it's going to cause a sticky brew day, a sticky mash. So honestly, we just kind of brew it as normal. Yeah, I mean, if you were making a triticale wine or something like that, yeah, you'd want to use some rice hulls or maybe some enzymes or something to help you along. But we don't use that high of a percentage of it. So.
Not too long ago, I talked to either a brewer or a maltster. It might have been with you, and they said, well, it's not so much that you can't use other grains than barley. It's just that so much of the brewing equipment was designed and built for barley.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I used to work for a company that builds brew houses, and pretty nice brew houses. And we honestly, I could see that as an issue because naked grains, although it is a Bavarian company and a lot of wheat beer is produced through those brew houses. But I would say, it is true. And then we also bump into the problem that how do you mill some of these well without them coating your rollers and your mills and stuff like that. So there's additional problems and things you have to overcome and learn how to deal with. And then they also have other things in them that are not normal for most of our barley products that we, malted barleys that we use. So you get a different mouthfeel and things going on too, which is also the reason to choose them, correct? I mean, it's different. You're trying to accomplish different aspects in your beer. So I think it's a fun challenge that they bring to the table that if you get it all right, works pretty good.
One thing, well, I keep referencing the Novare Res beer list from the Craft Malt Conference. It was the first time I'd seen in my lifetime a beer list dedicated to styles that really made the craft malt shine. What are those styles? You guys are out in sales. You're working with brewers. What are styles that breweries could take on and match them with the malts that you have?
So the quick answer is any beer. We make a full gauntlet of both base malts and specialty malts. With the completion of our new expansion, we're doubling down on our specialty malts as well. So there's really not a beer style out there that Blue Ox couldn't be a good solution for. I lean towards German beers myself. They do frequently focus and feature the malt profiles. I also say if I can only have one beer from a brewery, let it be the Pilsner, because then I can glean so much about your ingredients and philosophy and just stylistic choices that I feel like I can make a lot of accurate assumptions about the rest of the beer menu based off of the Pilsner. But there's really not a beer style out there that we don't have appropriate malts for.
Well, let's talk about the styles.
Which styles?
Oh, just a kind of short list of beer styles that would be great at showcasing the malts, maybe more malt forward styles for our listeners to think about, and for other brewers to say, hey, maybe that would be a good way for me to first try out some craft malts.
Sure. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is just a well-made, clean lager, something that's, the yeast is not taking the forefront. It's not going to steal the show in any way, and it's not, an overhopped beer. It's going to be a balanced beer of some kind. And like I said, lager comes to the forefront of my mind, which is mainly what we've been using them for until recently. Obviously, our Kolsch does use an ale yeast, but it's it's a clean ale yeast and it's fermented at a low temperature, so it's showcasing that malt. Or the Northwood's light beer that I described earlier. It's an ale yeast, but again, it's fermented at a low temperature to showcase the malt, and in that case, a little bit of the local hops as well. So,
and then some other traditional styles. You can go specific and niche-y.
Yeah, so one of the real exciting things that we do at Blue Ox is custom smoked malts, which becomes passion projects for a lot of brewers that want to make Rauch beers and smoky beers like that. And that is 100% focusing on those smoked malts for flavors. And you can get some real interesting characteristics out of those beers. So yeah, that's one that's definitely malt focused that I think is an interesting one for brewers to play around with.
And I think you can go into some of the trendy niche styles, I think, that pop up on Instagram and memes and stuff like that, like red ale or mild, dark mild too. A lot of those classic English styles that have now become, Americanized in some ways, those feature, a lot of craft malt, and they really feature a lot of flavors that would accentuate, what you'd be looking for. Say, oh, I want to make a beer with triticale. It's like you end up saying like, oh, I'm gonna feature this in a dark mild because it's gonna add a little bit of chewiness to this beer, a little bit of interesting, brown sugar flavors to this beer. So I think those style, again, the meme styles, because craft malt is kind of nichey, they work well for those styles of beer.
Yeah, I was actually going to go that direction too. I mean, I have a big heart. Oh no, you're right on the money. The lagers were easy to pick out because they do allow the malt really, without other flavors coming through, shine. But I would say I can't say that I didn't have a wonderful appreciation for English beers after living over there for 5 years, and that made me appreciate some of the malt profiles and stuff of some of those beers. So yes, I mean we have a dark mild in the tank right now. We have been doing some small batches of some bitters and stuff like that, traditional bitter, ordinary bitters, not ESBs. We do an ESB also. So we also dabble in that, and Rauch beer, yeah. So we have all of the named above. But I think focusing on some of the British kind of influenced classic styles works with that too, especially the ones that aren't focused on hops. And that could be light milds, which are fairly rare, dark milds, which are more common. And there's some other styles that are really wonderful. Some of the more ordinary bitters and best bitters, I would say, are pretty malt focused also.
And I think it's important to note that while Steve is saying all of this, he is wearing a Nirac shirt, New England Real Ale Exhibition. So I would say a shout out to cask ale everywhere and all those British beers and non-British beers that work so well in a cask. So
we did talk briefly that about the premiumization of cask ale. Pete Brown wrote about this acquisition. Thornbridge took over these old Burton Union system in England, which many of you could read about. But what the line I liked was premiumization of cask ale. And it seems to me that the cask ale styles, some of which can be bitters and milds, the traditional styles would probably do well with craft malt. If you're making a small batch of cask ale, you might want to use craft malt.
Absolutely. And I think, again, highlighting those flavors, cask ale, being served a little warmer than traditional, refrigeration temperature, being served slightly lower carbonation, you're taking away some variables that would maybe alter the flavor of those malts, or I shouldn't say cover them up, but just mask them in certain ways so that you do highlight, in a warmer service and a less carbonated service, you highlight a maltier beer, you can really get deep down into those malt flavors in a really nice way.
Yeah, with the cask ales, it's funny because it used to just be the way that beer came in every culture, everywhere. And Americans have had kind of contradictory opinions of what beer should be for the past 20, 30 years. Think it needs to be colder than ice, completely see-through, light in color. And cask beer is kind of the antithesis of that, where it is a little bit warmer. It's not as carbonated. You've got, just like when we're talking about lagers to highlight malt flavors, you've got less things to hide behind. So kind of the true character is coming through, which for beer lovers, that's really exciting, but it kind of goes into that education of the beer community. I don't think that Americans have caught on to cask ales in the way that they could and should yet. And so just through economics, they have to be a premium product because it's usually going to be a loss leader for breweries to make right now. That being said, I don't know a maker that doesn't absolutely want to do casks and gets really excited when you start talking about casks. It's one of those things the brewery industry would love to take off more than it currently is. We're just waiting for the community to get up there.
And then, Jeff, you mentioned you also make a Rauk beer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we've been making this specific Rauk beer, and it's the recipe of another one of our sort of legacy brewers downstairs, Alex Koff, formerly head brewer at Red Hook for I'm not even sure how long, but a while. So he designed this Rauk beer, and recently we used I think it was all Blue Ox malt. I think we used their Pilsner. Once again, and then I think it was Applewood smoked 50 pounds. It's only a 3-barrel batch, but it was 50 pounds of Applewood smoked malt from them. And it is fantastic. It's everything you'd want it to be. It highlights that smoke for sure.
Because that beer came out fantastic. It's a really good representation. I think it's wonderful. And I wish Alex was up here to appreciate that. You'll have to listen later.
Yeah, we could taste more too. Could hang out a little bit. I know you also have a Czech beer.
Yeah, that's on tap as well. Actually, it's on the Luker CZ faucet. And yeah, I mean, we designed that beer to be as true to style as we can. I mean, it's except for the fact that it's local malt. It's not Czech malt. It is Czech hops, and it's German yeast, egregiously. But the malts are all Blue Ox, other than that roasted malt. So it just kind of highlights the roasty malt flavors from the dark malt and that complex backbone of the Blue Ox Pilsner in the background, supporting that Czech hop flavor. And it is lagered for I think at least 4 weeks and served on that Czech faucet. So it's a nice experience.
Well, we talked about a lot of things. The next big follow-up will be talking about how you guys can collaborate with breweries on an interesting cask event, because it seems like that we all agree that if you're going to play around with different malts, that the cask beer might be one of the better ways to present it. What do you guys think of that?
I'm all for it. Yeah, we'll make sure to have a cask available if that happens.
I'm kind of kicking myself now that we're talking about it, but we kind of, recently just brewed Steve's Best Bitter, and that's on tap right now, and my dark mild's in the tank downstairs, and I feel like we kind of missed the boat on not using craft malt on those, but we had the British malt in stock, so that's what we used, but it's a conversation that we probably should have. Especially once you guys start doing some darker malts, so we can sub in the for the roasted malt in the dark mild rather than using crisp or whatever it was we used, the pale chocolate. I don't know.
So you don't like me, we like you.
Well, that's a great point, Jeff. So you're saying that you guys are still evolving with what you're turning out as maltsters.
Yeah, so we are weeks away from completing a massive expansion. When we're finished with this expansion, we're going to be the largest floor.
Not really that massive.
Well, massive in the floor malt world, for sure. We're going to be the largest floor maltster in the Americas when this is done. And a big part of that is we're adding a roasting drum, and we're going to be able to make pretty much any style of malts that we don't currently make. So we're really doubling down on those specialties while keeping our full line of really high quality and interesting base malts going as well. So we are really excited to grow with all of our customers and play around, particularly as we develop these new specialty malts. We're going to need to partner with our breweries to do test brewing and see how people like it.
That's cool. So you guys, in your growth, if you focus more on the Pilsner malts?
We're focusing on everything. So big goals of our expansion were that we didn't change our technique at all. We didn't need to add a ton of extra manual labor to it, and that we could continue to make our full portfolio, but make it better, more efficiently, and also add to it. So Pilsner is our second most popular behind Pale Malt, but Pale, Pilsner, Wheat, and Light Munich are all kind of in the running for most popular malt from us. And it's like choosing our children. We love them all, and we're increasing all of them across the board.
Great. So what do? We call you up and say, hey, we're working on beers. Do you just come and show up?
Yeah, oftentimes I do. It depends, we come and brew with people. Some people want to try out the malt before they commit to more with us. We'll come and brew with them, help with recipe writing, help with troubleshooting. And we really have the philosophy of malt for everyone. I have sold a bag to a home brewer this morning, and I also sold a gargantuan amount of malt to one of our largest customers this morning. We give all of those guys equal attention and love, and we're here for our community.
And it's an awesome opportunity as we grow. Specifically for me, my role is going to be focusing on the rest of New England and outside of New England. So as we grow, saying malt for all. Are we cheersing?
Yeah, say that. That's our toast. What did you just say?
Oh, I mean, yeah, I was going to say expanding. We're focusing on malt for all and being able to.
Malt for all. That's a good toast. One more toast. And then as we wrap up, last thing, anybody with a question? Steve, you seem like you're the thinker in the group. What's a question for someone else here or for the whole group?
I actually want to get up there when you do the Triticale because I did some research on it and I was like, wow, the only people who have actually worked hard for malting that are the Germans. Nobody else really has. So you guys have a unique product going on there. And I kind of want to come up and see it happen. I mean, I've always felt that, too many people forget there was so much focus on hops that malt, you can't make any beer without malt. You can make plenty of beer without hops. And so I love to make sure people recognize that. So anything I can learn more about malt, and these guys have the open door policy as far as I can tell. If you want to come up and drag a rake or something, they'll probably let you do it. So just wear your boots. So.
All right. Jeff, you want to have a question? This is a sales meeting. You have a question for the malt guys?
Sure. We've been talking about this for pretty much the whole time here and there, but when's the roaster coming online? Because we're excited for it. Back before, in the before times, long ago, when there was a different sales rep that used to come and visit me, there was a roasted product that we got, and it was fantastic. I can't remember exactly. I think it was a dark wheat. Yeah.
It tasted like pretzels.
The chocolate.
The pretzel. That was it.
The pretzel wheat. Yeah.
Yeah, and then you guys were using a local coffee roaster or something like that.
Maybe the chocolate rye.
Yeah, that might have been it.
Yeah. So the story on the chocolate rye, we used a local coffee roaster to roast it, which worked well. The product is really well loved. There's some big differences between barley and coffee when it comes to roasting, particularly the moisture content. So we came dangerously close to burning down and melting that roaster several times, at which point in time the coffee roaster politely asked us to stop, which we couldn't really argue because it was getting to that point. So we have a new roaster that is intended for malt. The biggest difference is we can introduce moisture into the system, so that helps us make everything from dark roasted malts to maybe lighter colored crystal malts and a whole host of other things in between. That is maybe the only product I can guarantee will be coming back is that chocolate rye. Everything else is a question mark, and hey, let's play around.
We're hoping at some point during the summer that roaster will come online.
Yeah, hopefully not too far out.
And then we'll look forward to seeing the beers that you make with that, Jeff.
We're going to invite you up for it.
Well, we're going to have a lot of fun up here. I can get on the Amtrak from Boston and make my way all the way up here. But you guys, thanks so much. Actually, Jeff's going to drive me to Durham, New Hampshire. I'm going to get on the Amtrak and go back down. So there's a lot of ways to get up here. Even though it's New Hampshire, there's a train that goes from Exeter, Durham, up all the way up to Portland and Freeport. So there's a lot of ways to get up here. You got to come up here and check it out this summer. In fact, I'm thinking about getting fried clams this summer and coming over and brew. He just perked up. He's like, let's go.
Go to Bob's on Route 1 in Kittery or get fried clams right next door.
You can walk right over there and get fried clams.
Yeah, so I can get clams here and then come over to the brewery.
Yep, you get pizza, you can get crullers, pizza crullers, ice cream. I mean, it's a one-stop shop for all of your vices, really.
Pizza crullers, they're a combination.
I wish. I mean, that's yeah. We're not going to talk about that.
I don't need a weird ice cream beer. I can literally just drink ice cream, eat ice cream, and drink beer in the same place.
I mean, theoretically, yeah. I mean, it might be a little weird if you bring ice cream over to the tap room, but I think you can do it. I don't think anyone's going to bat an eye at you.
We'll set you up a tent in the backyard, Jimmy.
See, now we're going to have fun. It was really great meeting you all and sitting with you and talking about this. But one last time, let's go around the room. You guys say your names and where you work.
Jeff Giles, Northwood's Brewing.
Ian Goering, Blue Ox Malthouse.
Joe Ronaldo, Blue Ox Malthouse.
And Steve Schmidt, Northwood Brewing.
All right, thanks so much. I'm Jimmy Carboni. I'm the host. Big shout out to our engineer, Armin Spengen, who's going to clean this up. And we'll catch you next time on Beer Sessions Radio. All right, thanks so much. Beer Sessions Radio is powered by Simplecast. Thanks for listening to Heritage Radio Network. Food radio supported by you. Keep in touch at heritageradionetwork.org/subscribe.
Craft cocktails, from the classics to zero-proof drinks, are all around us. But what if we told you that craft cocktails are actually a relatively recent addition to the culinary scene? My name is Toni Tipton-Martin, and I'm the editor-in-chief of Cook's Country at America's Test Kitchen. I want to introduce you to a podcast mini-series I'm hosting called 100 Proof, The Journey of the American Cocktail. Over 6 episodes, we'll look at how mixed drinks offer us a window into what was happening in America during the dawn of the cocktail. We'll then take you to the present day to contemplate what forces led to our modern cocktail renaissance. And along the way, we'll of course be sharing cocktail recipes with you. Subscribe to Proof from America's Test Kitchen so you won't miss the first episode. It drops on Thursday, May 23rd. Again, that's Proof, Proof, from America's Test Kitchen. Cheers.